That's where we are in some ways. I always go like, look, you may love or hate my movies. And
But they're
I'm
yours. They are 100%
I'm
Zach's
100%
movies.
fine with that. But a vote against me is a vote for the focus group version.
Right.
Just know that.
Yeah.
Know that by saying, Snyder sucks,
Yeah.
you're also saying, you know what? Give me some more focus groups.
Give me the down
some
the
more-
middle, vanilla.
Give me some more. I want Happy Meals. I don't want, that's all I'm saying. Is that it's
And it's like delicate, even though it's this robot, and it's like, it has a soul, and you can feel that just by looking at it.
Zack Snyder might be a good director, but he is not a good storyteller. Now, of course, the definition of what makes a good director can be argued in semantics, and whether or not being responsible for the story falls under a director or writer's responsibility can be up for debate. But in any case, what it doesn't change is the fact that someone who has a good eye for the visuals might not necessarily have the same skills for telling a compelling story. It's like having someone who's a really good driver, but who has absolutely no sense for directions and is completely lost in where to go. All of that is exactly what I felt when watching his latest film, Rebel Moon, which was supposedly his pitch for what he wanted to do for a Star Wars movie. But instead of something congruent and logically put together, this is like a B-grade version of a Star Wars film, but on a ridiculously bigger budget. It reminds me of those dodgy rip-off films from that company Asylum, which basically steals and copies ideas from other films, but makes cheesy low-budget versions of the original. This is exactly like that, just on steroids. The whole plot of Rebel Moon follows the story of a girl from a village searching to find soldiers to help defend her community. Truly an original concept that has only been done before in films like The Seven Samurai in 1954, The Magnificent Seven in 1960, A Bug's Life in 1998, The Magnificent Seven remake in 2016, and of course, who could forget Dragon Ball Z: The Return of Cooler. But whatever, I won't hold it too much against anyone borrowing the structure from other stories, because at the end of the day, it's a story about being a hero, and that's the oldest tale that there is. But it's the details that matter, and unlike all those other stories just mentioned, I don't think I've ever seen as much exposition in a film like I've seen in Rebel Moon. Holy hell, it seems like every time our protagonist Cora is asked a question by Gunnar, it's just like she has to go into this whole other side story that explains her origins to him. And I kid you not, at one point, she literally says, "I'm only telling you this story so you know my story."
I'm only telling you this so you know who I am.
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
So not only do we have exposition, but exposition for the exposition. It's exposition inception. I've never seen anything like it. What's also hilarious, as someone pointed out on Reddit, is that in a movie filled with Spider-Women, knockoff Nazis, and space vagina wormholes, one of the weirdest things you'll see is a robot taking a bath and then having a crown of flowers put on him. I get it, there was dirt on him, so he had to clean it off, but does he really have to take a bath to do so? If you think the writing is still not that bad, how about the nickname or title given to the princess who is literally described as the life giver? And then the subsequent explanation of what that name actually means with the line, she was called Life Giver, and she had the power to give life. If that isn't subtle, clever prose, then I don't know what is. Or moreover, what about just thinking about the sheer scale of the whole universe and the lonely idea that out of all the places in the galaxy, and more importantly, out of all the methods, skills, and technology, there is no better plan to provide resources for the Motherworld army than visiting a completely remote farming community that could supply 10,000 bushels of wheat. Is there no other reliable food source idea that you could come up with? What are you going to do after you get the wheat? Continue to use farmers, most of whom would have starved to death by this point? Or move on to find another remote farming community? What is their entire point of going to planet after planet and conquering worlds, if not at least to establish a larger self-sustaining empire? What is the sense in going to their worlds, destroying them, and completely killing everyone on them if you don't have anywhere to actually plant crops and grow a civilization? mission. Which reminds me, can we take a step back and look at the whole origin of Korra, aka Athelas, aka the Child of Fire, aka the Scar Giver? Her whole background feels oddly similar to the story of Gamora, who, like Korra, had a conquering world destroyer visit her planet, kill all of her family, and then adopt her as one of his own. Except in the story of Gamora, she never really forgave Thanos for his actions, and it created this interesting power dynamic where, even though he had raised her as his daughter, ultimately she would go on to betray him and avenge her bloodline for what he had done. And all of this was clearly shown throughout the film and Marvel Cinematic Universe. But with Korra, we get told a story where she becomes a high-ranking officer for the Motherworld Army after full knowledge of what they did to her world and what their mission is in to destroy other worlds, which she also seems to relish in doing so as well. But we never see why she turns away from her adopted stepfather or why she turns away from being bad and becomes good. Now this might be something left for part 2, but it makes no sense for the audience to be expected to root for her if you don't show it in part 1. And yes, I know we get some scenes in the opening 30 minutes that demonstrate her ability as the hero. But if I was gonna listening to her whole exposition backstory about how she helped destroy worlds and how she would have done the same thing to his farming village, I would want to know what the fuck happened to make her change back to being good, and how could I really trust her moving forward. I think this user on Reddit summed it up pretty nicely in that if you went throughout this script with a highlighter and just picked out the dialogue that wasn't an exposition dump or characters just directly stating their motivations, you simply wouldn't have anything left. Which takes me back to the opening scenes where at one point Korra goes on this completely over-the-top direct explanation of how her childhood has influenced her as an adult, which sounds like it could come across as a bit refreshing because you have this character just completely speaking her mind, but it sounds so off and awful that ultimately it just feels completely unnatural.
But understand, I am a child of war. To truly love and be loved, I don't know if I'm capable of either. The very idea of love, of family, was beaten out of me. I was taught that love is weakness.
That's boring. You're boring everybody. Quit boring everyone.
Now, before I end this review, I have to mention some of the minor points that aren't exactly game-breaking bugs, but that are nevertheless irritating to say the least. Number 1, the weird choice of a dodgy accent for the father of the village played by the actor Corey Stoll. I'm sorry, but whatever instruction was given to do a Russian/Scandinavian Viking type of accent, along with giving you that beard, was a horrible decision because it simply does not suit you, nor does it sound very good.
My people, it is my duty as the head of this community to remind you that the gods of the harvest demand a tribute.
Soon we'll be able to look back on this and laugh.
Number 2, the guy who enslaves one of the fighters because of a debt that he owes just randomly decides to give him away on the basis of some bet that he can't fly this giant eagle. Why? He owes you something like 24 seasons worth of work, and are you that much of a gambling addict to just give away something so useful like that so carelessly? Number 3, why does the robot run away after helping Korra and the soldiers? I get maybe that's something they want to set up for the second part, but couldn't that have been more interesting to see how this loyal machine dedicated to the Motherworld turns and helps the soldiers fight and maybe infiltrate the Motherworld? Also, what happened to that kid soldier who was there? He seemed like he was basically in the film for nothing. Why did that small army of soldiers even recruit him when clearly he has a completely different point of view to them and their whole mission? And finally, don't even get me started on the complete ridiculousness of the final battle action sequence where we have the ship colliding into that hovering port system and having the antagonist Noble just stare at it in awe with this dumbfounded expression, not even reacting to Korra coming up to him while he can clearly see her. And then for him to somehow end up surviving that ridiculously big fall? I mean, what the fuck is going on? Altogether, Rebel Moon Part 1 is just another indicator to me that Zack Snyder's best aspects are when it comes to the visual side of filmmaking. And even though he still overdoes it when it comes to the sheer amount of super slow-mo shots that he just seems to love doing, I will say there are some fantastic looking scenes that are almost like a painting. The same could also be said for the character designs, with some interesting little concepts and visuals sprinkled throughout here or there. But man, oh man, can he not write nor work with good writers, and importantly, understand how to actually tell a good story, which seems completely baffling to me because interviews I've seen of him clearly show that the man understands and appreciates comic book storytelling, but for whatever reason, he just doesn't know how to adapt them onto the screen, and he doesn't know what made them great stories in the first place. Ultimately, I hope he takes this experience as a learning lesson, and maybe we can get something more interesting from him in the future. Or maybe he just works with someone who is actually a good screenwriter. But from what I've seen from him throughout history, I won't be holding my breath.
For we all know it is the thrusting of hips and the loud sounds of pleasure that summon the seedlings to sprout.
Only on Netflix.
Yeah, check that out on Netflix.